going to do his time like a man, and he's going to come out and be a productive member of society.
James Burke, who served as Suffolk County's police chief from 2012 to 2015, was apprehended at Vietnam Veterans Memorial Park in Farmingville. According to an arrest report obtained by the Associated Press, he exposed himself to the ranger and expressed interest in engaging in oral sex. In an attempt to evade the arrest, Burke reportedly tried to leverage his past role as a law enforcement official. The arrest was part of a targeted operation prompted by complaints about individuals soliciting sexual activities in the park. As he was being apprehended, Burke inquired with the Rangers if they were aware of his identity, and he expressed his concern that his arrest would result in public humiliation for him, according to Sergeant Brian Quattrini. Burke is facing several charges, including offering a sex act, public lewdness, indecent exposure, and criminal solicitation, as stated by Suffolk County Police Commissioner Rodney Harrison. James Burke has a history of encountering legal issues. While he is not directly linked to the Gilgo Beach murders, his tenure as police chief was marked by actions and decisions that garnered criticism for complicating the investigation. Burke's obstruction of federal agencies, alleged personal connections to criminal elements, and involvement in a violent incident raised concerns about the thoroughness and impartiality of the investigation. One pivotal incident involved Burke assaulting a suspect, Christopher Loeb, and subsequently attempting to cover it up. This incident damaged the department's credibility and diverted attention from the murder case. These factors were argued to have hindered the progress of the case and potentially affected the pursuit of justice for the victims and their families. Startling revelations have come to light regarding Burke's alleged affinity for drugs and involvement with prostitutes. Former colleagues have portrayed him as a psychopath characterized by a constant state of being horny and an unfounded sense of being untouchable. Burke officially joined the Suffolk County Police Department in 1986 when he was just 21 years old. By the time he turned 26 in 1991, he had risen to the rank of sergeant. 2 years after that, Burke engaged in sexual activity with a previously convicted prostitute inside his patrol car. Burke also had a sexual relationship with Loretta Fields, a prostitute and drug dealer with a criminal record. She had been arrested several times in the same precinct where Burke held a supervisory role. The Internal Affairs report concerning his association with Fields highlights Burke's reputation as an exceptional street cop who possessed a deep understanding of local street individuals. In my opinion, the only deep understanding Burke exhibited was of the prostitutes he sought to engage with sexually, and I find it difficult to be persuaded otherwise. In another case, the Internal Affairs Bureau conducted an investigation to determine whether Burke was connected to a prostitution ring. Burke vehemently denied these allegations, referring to them as absolutely false. Based on the available records, the Internal Affairs Bureau investigation concluded that these allegations could not be verified and were thus labeled as unsubstantiated. On December 14, 2012, a 26-year-old named Christopher Loeb was arrested by police outside his mother's home in Smithtown, New York. The officers slammed him into the ground during the arrest and took him to the Suffolk County Police Department. They restrained him by chaining him to the floor. Despite being kept in the dark about the cause of his arrest and being denied access to legal assistance, Loeb began to suspect that his treatment was connected to a black duffel bag he had recently stolen from an unlocked black 2008 GMC Yukon. When he looked inside the bag he had stolen, he came across items that appeared to be associated with a police officer. But Loeb also uncovered items that hinted at something more disturbing, as shared by a friend of Loeb's who spoke with him following the incident. He saw what he described as porn that allegedly included underage boys. Federal sources stated that Loeb was mistaken about what he saw inside the bag that belonged to James Burke. Based on court documents, James Burke reportedly took pleasure in overseeing the abuse inflicted upon Loeb at the police station. He shared with fellow officers, in a somewhat nostalgic tone, that it reminded him of his earlier days in the force. In a joking manner, Burke referred to the officers who assisted him in restraining Loeb as his palace guards. One of these officers allegedly went as far as threatening to sexually assault Loeb's mother during the ordeal. Additionally, Burke reportedly issued a threat to Loeb, suggesting that he could orchestrate a hot shot, a lethal heroin overdose that would appear as if it were self-inflicted. In the weeks that followed, Burke exerted pressure on his fellow officers to conceal the brutal assault. One officer conveyed to the U.S. Attorney's Office that if Burke were to find out that he had cooperated with the FBI during the investigation, he would face severe consequences.
It's a prominent police officer now going to prison. The fate sealed for a law enforcement official convicted of crimes. Good evening once again. I'm Maurice Dubois.
Welcome back. I'm Christine Johnson. An overflow crowd packed into a federal court today as the tables turned on a top cop sentenced for beating a suspect.
Once at the height of power in Suffolk County, he is now heading to prison. CBS 2's Carolyn Gussoff reports from Central Islip.
My client is going to do his time like a man, and he's going to come out and be a productive member of society.
An extraordinary judgment day as his attorney pleads for mercy for the once powerful James Burke. Suffolk's former top uniformed cop in jailhouse khakis apologized to the citizens of Suffolk County for a misguided attempt to protect police and myself, a calamitous misdeed.
He's made mistakes. He's remorseful.
That misdeed against now vindicated Christopher Loeb.
I got choked, I got punched, I got slapped, I got kicked.
Loeb, a petty thief and addict who broke into Burke's police car and stole a duffel bag filled with pornography and sex toys. While handcuffed, Burke beat him, threatened his life and his mother, then orchestrated a cover-up.
There was a level of justice here, and then even somebody as high-ranking as the chief of police can't engage in that kind of misconduct and that kind of corruption and that kind of cover-up and get away with it.
In court, Loeb delivered a scathing statement, locking eyes with the once untouchable Burke. Your abuse of power and the public's trust is appalling. You told me no one would believe me.
I think it just shows that, anybody will fall when they don't follow the law.
The judge opened the floor to anyone in the packed courtroom to speak, among them former Suffolk cop Rob Trotta, who calls corruption under Burke like the Gestapo.
I think that it's the beginning of the end of corruption. I think we still have a long way to go.
The last word from Judge Leonard Wexler, who called Burke a dictator. He corrupted a system, not in one case, but over 3 years. Prosecutors have suggested more arrests at low and high levels of Suffolk law enforcement, but any additional arrests will happen with defendant Burke behind federal prison bars for the next 3 years.
Based on accounts from former police officers, local politicians, lawyers, and Suffolk County residents, it's believed that Burke's conviction might only be the initial step in what has the potential to unravel into one of the most surreal federal investigations of local law enforcement in the history of the United States. This complex investigation would include accusations of unlawful wiretapping, efforts to hide misconduct, issues related to sex addiction, instances of law enforcement officers driving under the influence, and blackmail. Tom Spota, the former district attorney of Suffolk County, played a significant role in propelling James Burke's advancement to a position of power. Their close friendship can be traced back to their shared involvement in a highly publicized murder trial. On April 21, 1979, Joseph Sabina discovered 13-year-old John Pius Jr., his neighbor, lying still in the yard of Dogwood Elementary School. Disturbingly, John Jr. had been asphyxiated with stones that had been forced into his throat. The case was handled by a young Spota, who was the assigned prosecutor. Remarkably, Burke, who was only 14 years old at the time, played a pivotal role as one of Spota's main witnesses. Ultimately, local teenagers from Smithtown, Michael Quartararo, his brother Peter Quartararo, Thomas Ryan, and Robert Bresnik were found guilty of the murder. For certain individuals, the outcome of the Pius case didn't provide the sense of resolution they sought. Attorney Frank Bress, currently a law professor at New York Law School in Manhattan, is among those who remain dissatisfied. Bress represented Robert Bresnik during an appeal in 1986. According to Bress, Burke was engaged in minor burglary and drug dealing during his youth, making his testimony less dependable. Presently, his belief remains consistent with what he held back then, that all 4 boys were innocent. Bress alleges that Spota blurred the lines between his roles as a prosecutor and a civil attorney. He points out that Spota handled the victim's side of civil lawsuits that he had personally prosecuted in criminal court. A dated file copy from the Bresnik retrial even makes mention of Spota's financial interest in litigating cases. Bress said, "In my view, it was clear from the start that Spota's conduct was questionable. The manner in which he seamlessly navigated between prosecuting criminal cases and handling civil matters was marked by ethical concerns. Even if there is no actual wrongdoing, the appearance of impropriety can damage public trust in the legal system. When the same individual is involved in multiple capacities within a single case, it can raise suspicions about their motives and actions." The close and seemingly friendly relationship between Spota and Burke gave rise to questions about whether personal connections were influencing official decisions and actions. Spota's role as the district attorney required him to uphold justice and impartiality. However, his association with Burke compromised his ability to objectively investigate or prosecute cases involving the former police chief. So instead of doing the right thing, Spota and his deputy orchestrated a cover-up aimed at shielding Mr. Burke from scrutiny. They applied pressure on potential witnesses, urging them not to cooperate with the federal investigation into the assault on Christopher Loeb.
Federal investigators charged the longtime district attorney and his assistant with a cover-up scheme designed to protect the former police chief, who is now in jail. It was a salacious case involving sex toys stolen from the police chief's car and the brutal beating of a suspect. Now, 5 years later, more indictments. Eyewitness News reporter NJ Burkett has the details. He is in Central Islip tonight. NJ.
That's right, Joe. Spota left the courthouse just a short time ago with his attorney, who denied the charges and vowed to mount what he called a vigorous defense. But this is a bombshell indictment in Suffolk County. Thomas Spota, the county's top prosecutor for 16 years, now himself under criminal indictment. This case goes back to 2012 and led to the arrest and conviction of the county's police chief. The Suffolk County District Attorney pleaded not guilty this afternoon to a 4-count federal indictment. Thomas Spota and his top corruption prosecutor indicted for attempting to cover up the station house assault of a burglary suspect, then attempting to obstruct the FBI's investigation.
Tom categorically denies the government's charges, and he looks forward to vindicating himself in court.
The charges: conspiracy, witness tampering, obstruction of justice, and accessory after the fact to deprivation of civil rights. Specifically, the beating of Christopher Loeb in 2012. Loeb was accused of unwittingly breaking into the car of the county police chief, James Burke. Burke later admitted to beating Loeb while Loeb was in handcuffs at the 4th Precinct station house. The former chief is now serving a 46-month sentence in federal prison.
If the police can beat me and Kyle, they can beat anyone.
Burke was a close ally of the district attorney and in some respects his protege. Spota has been under investigation by the FBI for several years for his suspected conduct in trying to protect Burke. While FBI agents were working to restore justice in a civil rights investigation, said the U.S. Attorney, District Attorney Thomas Spota and Assistant District Attorney Christopher McPartland were conspiring to obstruct it, as alleged today. The crimes they're charged with are rivaled only by the conduct they allegedly attempted to conceal. End quote.
Spota's attorney had requested that the judge give Spota absolutely no prison time and rather did home confinement and community service. The judge told Spota he already did community service. That was his job as Suffolk County District Attorney. She says instead of upholding the public's trust, he violated it. Former Suffolk County District Attorney Thomas Spota did not want to speak with reporters after leaving court this afternoon. Christopher McPartland, Spota's co-conspirator and former top aide, received the same sentence as his former boss, 5 years.
The verdict and today's sentences demonstrate that no one is above the law, and those who abuse their oath of office and the enormous power vested in them by the public will suffer severe consequences.
34-year-old Christopher Loeb is the reason Spota and McPartland have been held accountable. Spota and McPartland tried to squash a federal investigation into Burke by instructing officers who witnessed the assault to lie under oath and threaten them if they did not. Loeb spoke at the sentencings today.
This is my defining moment, was to have the courage to get up there and, tell the truth. For years, they've been calling me a drug addict. For years, they've been calling me a liar.
The current Suffolk DA said the sentences are justified. The actions of these defendants represent the worst of law enforcement, said DA Timothy Sini.
Spota's actions in the case against Burke and his interference in the investigation of the Gilgo Beach murders could have delayed the discovery of crucial evidence needed to solve the case. Suffolk County District Attorney Timothy Sini revealed that he examined a case file report indicating that detectives were prohibited from sharing case details with the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit. According to Spota, the choice to forego FBI involvement in 2012 was grounded in the local authorities' perspective that the contributions from federal agents duplicated efforts that were already in progress. The current Suffolk County District Attorney Ray Tierney brought the investigation back to life when he entered office in 2022 and assembled a task force that includes detectives from various levels of law enforcement as well as investigators from his office. Using information gathered in the early stages of the investigation, the Gilgo Beach task force quickly identified Rex Hoyerman as the culprit. They then trailed him for over a year until arresting him on July 13th. Hoyerman is the main suspect in the death of Brainerd Barnes and was charged in the murders of Costello, Bartholomew, and Waterman. Hoyerman, an architect from Manhattan who lives approximately 15 miles from the Massapequa Park dump site, entered a not guilty plea to all counts. For John Ray, an attorney representing the families of two of the women discovered on the beach, Burke's purported history involving sex workers clashed with his role in overseeing the case. Ray expressed this contradiction, stating, "So here is this individual with a clear inclination towards sex workers tasked with investigating the murders of sex workers. It's akin to having a thief in charge of probing robberies."
2007 when the first victim went missing. The first bodies were found in 2010, but it's not until now that any arrests have been made.
Fox 5's Teresa Priolo is in the newsroom with a look back at this timeline of the case and the changes within the Suffolk County Police Department that might have helped lead to this arrest. Teresa.
Yes, certainly, Natasha and Steve. This is an investigation with so many twists and turns, so many stops and starts. And as you mentioned, while most people who have been following this case might think that December 2010 is the beginning of it, what you are about to see is a timeline of events that begins in 2007 with the disappearance of Maureen Brainerd Barnes.
We were here looking for Shannon Gilbert. That was the whole reason for our searches here over the last number of months. We had and have an active missing persons case.
That missing persons case, the case of sex worker Shannon Gilbert, was the tipping point in what would turn out to be an extensive, mystifying hunt for a serial killer living in plain sight. Over the years, Gilbert's case was found not to be connected to the Gilgo Four, but the hunt for her remains is what spurred the initial investigation. It's a timeline that begins in July of 2007. That's when Maureen Brainerd Barnes went missing in New York City. She was contacted by a burner phone. The last time she was seen alive was July 9th, 2007. 2 years later, July 2009, was the last last time Melissa Bartholomew was seen alive. The burner phone that contacted her was pinged in Massapequa Park. It was the search for her body that led to the Gilgo 4. Megan Waterman went missing in June of 2010, and in September of that year, Amber Costello was last seen alive. December of 2010, during the search for Bartholomew, their bodies were found in Gilgo Beach. The first, December 11th, 2010, the next three, December 13th. Fast forward to April of 2011. 4 more bodies are discovered, making investigators question how many killers are at work. Throughout the investigation, there have been multiple police commissioners, some who wanted the FBI and their search tools involved, and some who did not. But in 2018, Geraldine Hart became the 4th Suffolk Police Commissioner to oversee this investigation after a 20-year career with the FBI. Her tenure with the FBI brought an understanding of this case and a renewed sense of urgency, including the discovery of a leather belt ritualistically tied around the victims. And then December 2021, former NYPD Chief Rodney Harrison takes over as Suffolk Police Commissioner. And within a month, he establishes the Gilgo Beach Homicide Investigation Task Force. Their sole purpose? To bring the killer to justice. And they got their big break this week.
Now, in January of last year, the Suffolk County DA assigned a team of investigators to review every item of evidence in this investigation. 2 months in, they discovered a Chevy Avalanche. It was registered to Rex Uhrman at the time of the murders. Investigators believe that is significant because they say, Steve and Natasha, it ties him to Amber Costello.